Hello and welcome back, Eddie Radosovich, George Stoya here, an OU Alabama Monday. Josh McCuistion back in Houston HQ, and I guess a little bit of a wrap-up, obviously headed into the second round of the playoffs in the state of Texas and the state of Oklahoma. A number of games. I think I'll be getting out to a OK Preps game on Friday night. We'll kind of tell you a little bit more about that. Welcome in to the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel, another recruiting report here as, believe it or not, we get to the middle of, or I guess near the end of November. And let's start with a decision that came out on Sunday evening, Josh. I think certainly took all three of us by surprise. 2025 defensive lineman from Jenks, Oklahoma, Cash Jacobson, commits to Southern California on the heels of a visit to Los Angeles over the weekend, a win over the Cornhuskers. And Josh, let's just start here. Just how surprising was that? A guy that I think a lot of people would have ended up in Norman, but he's going to take his talents to Los Angeles as it stands now.
There's no question. This was a surprise thing to me. It was one of those deals where I believe it was Bob that sent it in our little group message, and I kind of had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't just, I was like, oh, I read that wrong. It's a great visit kind of thing. And then you're like, no, he's committed. And even at that point, it was kind of like, okay, guy hasn't taken a lot of these big-time visits. He's, he committed. He got swept up in the moment. He'll come back. He'll take his visit to OU, and then we'll kind of see where everything falls. Talking to Cash last night, Cash acted like he kind of thought this was a possibility coming into the weekend. Talking to those around him, I didn't get that impression at all. It's not just us that were surprised. Talking to, people we've known a long time at Jenks, a lot of sources around there, I think they were a little blindsided by this. So it's one of the more surprising, when you consider all this has happened over the course of about 3 weeks. Jacobson, we get word that he's going to visit right before the main weekend. He takes that visit, he picks up an offer, and then you flip around. And he and I spoke later that week, and it sounded very pro-Oklahoma to me. Was very adamant that he was going to take both of his visits to USC and then to Oklahoma. Was supposed to be this weekend for the Alabama game. And now here we sit. I mean, this is it's a wild turn of events. I know people will kind of turn this into a referendum, and we can get into that if we want to. But it's a tough look for Oklahoma. I don't think there's any way to spin that.
Josh, where does Oklahoma go from here? Do they continue to try to go after Cash and maybe try to flip him late? I know we're, a month out from, or less than a month.
Less than a month, a couple
weeks from signing day. Do they pivot in a different direction? I mean, what do you think's next for Oklahoma after this one?
I would expect through the rest of this week, they're going to try to get Cash Jacobson on campus. They're going to try to get him up for Alabama, try to, because, again, I spoke to him last night. He'd committed 15 minutes before. Like I understand it. Like he's in the moment. He's very much sure of it. And that may be what it ends up. I don't want to say that I know what he's thinking better than he does. But we've seen this. Like, we've watched these things play out before. Guys get a few days, they get a little farther away from that visit and say, I still am committed to USC, but I want to go check out Oklahoma. I just want to go see, make sure I didn't miss something, really give them the same opportunity I gave USC. I think Oklahoma will try that. If by Thursday it doesn't look like that's going to happen, they're going to have to pivot, guys. We talked about this when they offered Cash. You can't take one defensive tackle. You just can't do it. I think 3 should be the goal. So they're going to have to do some work. They're going to have to find somebody. It's a problem. Like you look at this defensive line class, you got the 2 in-state edges with Alex Shield Knight and CJ Nixon. And then you've got Trent Wilson, who I think is a really talented guy and is having a big time senior year, but 3 along your defensive line that's problematic.
Certainly going to be expensive if you have to dip into the defensive tackle rotation or the defensive end rotation come portal season.
I will say, I don't think Dominic Williams has made a decision yet. We'll see if
and obviously has an option to come back.
Yes.
I mean, obviously Oklahoma, I think, would want him back from the production that he had this year.
Oklahoma is in discussions with trying to get him to stay.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dominic is trying to figure out what he wants to do. Some of that, again, a lot of this will determine on draft grades and things of that nature that I'm sure will come in the next couple weeks. So
and certainly
something to pay attention to.
Something, as we talked about last week, going to have multiple opportunities here with Alabama and LSU on the schedule coming up. Certainly money games, if you will, for some of these guys that are going to be making decisions here over the next couple weeks. Let's stick with the good news then. We might as well, and I'm being sarcastic and facetious about that, but Jaden O'Neal got back out onto the field for the first time since September, ended up having a massive night for Narbonne. They win 47-13 over Dorsey. The Oklahoma 2026 quarterback commit goes 18 for 25, 405 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 more scores on the ground on 36 carries. 6 carries for 36 yards. That's not the big news, though. Obviously, Jaden O'Neal visited Colorado over the weekend. Josh, I guess let's start here. How surprising was that?
I've been a little surprised. I guess my surprise is that it's Colorado. And that's no shot at Colorado. It's more of that's not where I kind of expected him to look around at.
Right.
When Seth Luttrell was let go, he was the guy. I think we talked about it on this show. This was the guy that I said, this is the guy that's most connected to Seth Luttrell. This is the guy that I think is going to feel, the most, I don't know, abandoned. It's not the right word, but that's the best thing I can think of to explain it. That was his connection. His dad had a good relationship with Seth. Obviously, Jaden did as well. So I thought he would look around. It surprised me a little bit that Colorado was the choice. But, again, I they've got some momentum right now. There's just no doubt about it. So I think it's probably a good sign that it is Colorado. If he goes to visit, I don't know, Oregon or something like that, you're like, oh, okay, now you're swimming in a little different water. But Colorado is not a school, even with Deion, even with Oklahoma's situation, it's not a school you expect to beat Oklahoma head up for a recruit all that often. It's going to happen from time to time. There's no question. But due to NIL, due to history, due to everything else, it's just unlikely.
Yeah.
So I think that is the silver lining. And I know, there was a video that got out. I think it was on his Instagram or one of the local California sites that covers a lot of high school recruiting. Had a picture, he scored a touchdown on Friday night in that game you're talking about, and he threw up the OU. So, this isn't a kid that's just walking on OU. He doesn't know what the situation is. He, just like us, he doesn't know who the coordinator is going to be. He doesn't know who the quarterback's coach is going to be. He'd be a fool not to look around and see what else is out there in case they hire someone he doesn't like or doesn't think he's a fit in that offensive scheme, whatever it may be. So I think Jaden's just being smart and doing his due diligence here. I don't know how OU fans could begrudge him this decision.
Colorado's such an interesting one because I don't know, is Deion going to be there next year? I have no idea.
Sure.
With Shadur going to the NFL, their offensive coordinator is Pat Shurmur, who I covered in Denver. He was the Broncos offensive coordinator when I was there.
Worked with Sam Bradford in St. Louis, I believe.
A very boring guy.
He's one of my good friends. We talked at Sam's wedding.
Shurmur's an interesting guy. I just never thought he would work out in college. And you look at what they're doing offensively there, and he's done a phenomenal job. He doesn't strike me as a great recruiter being an NFL guy. I wonder if he's there next year, especially if Deion ends up jumping somewhere. So I don't know. I don't really have anything to offer on this, I guess, but having known Pat Shurmur, it just seems like it would be an interesting fit for a guy like Jaden O'Neal. But again, I think Josh is right. If you're a recruit right now and you're committed to Oklahoma, especially 2026 kid on the offensive side of the ball, why wouldn't you at least kind of consider your options right now? Because you have no idea who's going to be the guy at OC.
Josh, just real quick, kind of a follow-up on Jaden O'Neal as well. I know that there was a little bit of scuttlebutt out there about him reclassifying into 2025. Is that still an option? And is that something that he would maybe explore here over the next, I guess you'd have to make a decision rather quickly. At the same time, though, with as weird as his junior season's been at Narbonne with the games that were canceled, maybe he just pulls back and says, I want to play one more year of high school football.
That's kind of my feel of it, because you're not hearing a lot of momentum in that direction. And the thing that makes it tricky is because I know a lot of people would say, well, okay, he doesn't have to be done by December. He could wait until the spring and still be a 2025 guy. But it kind of defeats the purpose. Sure. You're going to show up in the summer, you're not going to come in when I think we all expect whatever plays out, offensively, there's going to be a quarterback competition. You'd want to get in there and be part of that. if you're a young, talented guy like Jaden O'Neal. So, okay, maybe. But to me, like, if he's going to do that, we're going to have to see the dominoes fall really fast. There have been some other rumors, maybe, I think Jaden, I guess I would say I think Jaden's considering all options right now. And I don't mean that as far as college choices. I mean that as far as how he wants the last year and a half of his kind of high school, window to play out. So there are some things in play. I think people should keep an eye on Jaden O'Neal. But again, I don't think people should lose hope in this situation. If Oklahoma can make the right hire at OC and can figure out how to get themselves back on track in 2025, I think there's a lot of reason for optimism with Jaden O'Neal. He's not a guy that's been negative about it. I think he's been very, to his credit, very mature about it. Like, just kind of said, okay, let's see what happens. I'm not going to make any rash decisions. I'm not going to, decommit or affirm myself. Like, I'm just going to kind of say status quo. And then once I have more information, then I'll start kind of figuring out what I want to do.
Very good. Still a long way to go there. We're going to wrap up with kind of just cleaning up everything from the 2025 class. Obviously, you have a bunch of guys that have saw their season come to an end. But first, let us tell you about William & Lauren, the official custom clothier of OU football. William & Lauren outfits your favorite OU players in custom suits that boost their confidence off the field to match their confidence on the field. Their perfectly tailored clothing ensures every student stands out in comfort and style at prices that make luxury accessible. Visit William & Lauren in Oklahoma City or online at williamandlauren.com. That is in Oklahoma City, the brick and mortar. They also have one coming up in Tulsa in the 918 or online at williamandlauren.com. Dress like a champion and make your style as legendary as Oklahoma football. Thank you to the fine people of williamandlauren.com. Cortez Mills, he's been a, weekly installment here with the Homestead product. A really nice night. 5 receptions, 72 yards, 2 touchdowns, had one from 7 yards as well as 23, had a couple tackles as well as a pass breakup. All in all, though, Homestead falls short in his senior, finale there down in the state of Florida, Josh, and certainly a guy that has become a weekly stop here for us on the recruiting report. Another really good night to close out his Homestead career.
Yeah, sorry to see his video will come to an end here. Cortez was just a guy that every week you were hoping that they would put out video, and I thought Homestead did a great job for OU fans, kind of letting them see him and see him do his work. But in this one, if I understand it correctly, and I will say, you can definitely tell look, I don't mean to take shots here, but look in the stands. Like, you can tell there is a different fervor for high school football in some places. And Florida, as great as the talent is in Florida, there's not a lot of people that follow Florida high school football, especially in that Miami area. It's just very passive. And so it's kind of hard to get real game breakdowns of what happened. But as I understand it, Homestead took a late lead, went up 21-20, I believe, on a touchdown catch for Mills. This play right here is unbelievable, where he changes his body in midair, like, to have this control where the ball's thrown behind him. He goes up, he gets it, and then as he's in air, he's already changing direction. Like, he's rerouting himself, catches that ball back behind him. Now look at him just turn, plant, and he's already gone back the other way. Like, I think, people ask all the time, like, Josh, who's the most underrated guy in the class? Cortez Mills is highly valued, and so it's tough for me to say him, but I could make that case that there's a big difference between where he is seen, I think, nationally, and the kind of player I think he is. I think Cortez Mills has a chance to be a legit big-time, like a future NFL prospect type of player.
Is he still – how's his commitment right now, Josh? I know he was the one guy that you were – I think I asked you maybe that was a week ago or 2 weeks ago about guys possibly flipping or something. Where's he at with his commitment?
George, I think it's weekly at this point that we're having that conversation. But no, to my understanding, and talking to people around Oklahoma, I think they feel pretty good about him. He's not one of the ones that I get big alerts on, and not that really any of them at this point, but I think he kind of had his flirtation, and I think he knows if he's going to step over that line, that'll probably be it for him in Oklahoma. So I think he's trying to be very careful about that. I have no doubt, he's still talking to other programs. I know Nebraska is still trying to get him back on campus. So they're far from the only ones, obviously, with him having a great senior year. But I don't get the feeling that there's a lot of concern. But Cortez Mills feels like, because like I said, he's right up there where, okay, you're on double secret probation kind of thing. Like if he's going to do it, it's going to be done. And so if he's got anything cooking, I would see it like that last week in November, right before the signing day, he takes a visit. And then we all know, like, it's probably, the hay's out of the barn at that point in time, whether it's from his side or Oklahoma's. I think you would just see the dissolution of the whole situation. So, like I said, I think Oklahoma's in a good spot. Cortez is never going to tell you too much. But again, I don't have anything at this point that is sending up a red flag.
Josh's time is coming on the board when he posts an update that somebody's visiting. Everybody ends up hating him. It's part of the Christmas cheer on the Crimson Corner. Torrey Blaylock, 14 carries, 116 yards, 2 touchdowns. Toxicita wins, but a lot closer than I think probably a lot of people thought, 50-45 over Dickinson. A little bit closer to home. CJ Nixon's high school season comes to an end. His high school career comes to an end. 28-6 loss to Bethany. But we did want to show this. CJ Nixon had an 80-yard touchdown into the game. And when you remember how big of a kid he is, the man can move with the football in his hands. Obviously going to be playing the opposite side of the football once he gets to Norman, Josh.
Yeah, CJ, again, tough matchup. Guys, 4A in Oklahoma is really good. Like that's going to be a fun run all the way in. Weatherford goes down to Bethany. Bethany's a good team, lost to Tuttle, lost to, I believe, they got one other one. Elgin looks like they're going to be a beast. Wagner's always there. We know that's just every year they're going to be a fixture
team ready to go.
Thing. Yeah, there's no doubt. So, I mean, that is, to me, I would say, I think 5A, there's no real question about who's coming home with that one. 6A2 could be interesting. I think 6A1 is kind of fun. But 4A, I could make a case for 3 or 4 or 5 teams, really. Tuttle's obviously going to be right there. So there's a lot of really good teams. And, of course, we're not even talking about the defending state champions in Blanchard. So, I mean, like, there's just a lot of teams that can do this.
There's unfortunately not a whole lot of reason to talk about Blanchard. They got upset by Clinton on Friday night, 21-20.
Oh, no, I missed it entirely.
Yeah, absolutely. In Blanchard, sounds like they had like a trio of opportunities in the fourth quarter to get over the finish line, and we're unable to do so. So Clinton actually heads to Wagner this weekend in 4A. But you're right, everybody else, Elgin, Salasad, Tuttle, Hilldale, Ada, Bethany, some of the who's who names there in 4A going into this week. We'll have a little bit more on the OK Prep situation. Certainly going to be getting out to see some of the playoff stuff here, over the next couple weeks. I know I'm going to be headed out on Friday, possibly. We'll get to that here in a second. Couple of notes from like just a national perspective. On Monday, it was announced by On3, Michael Fasusi, now formally a consensus 5-star. From everything that we talked about last week here on the Recruiting Report, Josh, certainly lines up. Michael Fasusi having a fantastic senior season.
Yeah. I won't lie. I had a few people hit me up, and I mean, guys in the industry that were like, wait, Michael wasn't already a 5-star on 3, And I like Cody Belair. Like, I've dealt with him a lot. I know Charles Power. A lot of people really I haven't dealt with Charles much one-on-one. I like both those guys. I just happen to disagree. Like, I thought Michael should have been a 5-star all along. But what it matters is if you get it right in the end. I think, On3 has gotten there with Michael Fasusi, and he's had an outstanding year. There's no doubt about it. And again, watching him, last week or a couple weeks ago, guys with his size, his flexibility. And the thing I like about Mike that I see more this year than I had in previous years, he'll finish, guys. Like, he has some attitude to him. I can't help but wonder if that was sparked, Eddie, at that Under Armour camp that we talk about in the spring when he and Zane Rowe really got into it.
Yeah.
I think Michael kind of realized at that point, you're the guy now. Everybody's coming after you, and how are you going to handle that? And I think from that point forward, Michael was like, I'm just going to beat the brakes off of everybody.
It certainly seems like he's had a really good season. Louisville does fall on Friday night to Allen, as you saw there, 17-3. So the Allen Eagles, Kyler Murray's former Allen Eagles, they move on into the playoffs. Michael Fasusi's, I guess star-studded career at Louisville comes to an end. Let's go another national headline, and from On3, Emmanuel Choice, the Lancaster wide receiver commit. He is one of the biggest movers in the country, going from number 246 overall into the top 100 at 93. Lancaster did see their season come to an end on Friday night. 5 receptions, 67 yards, a trio of touchdowns from 15, 9, and 8. And Josh, we talked about Cortez Mills, but another guy that has signed or has committed to play for Emmanuel Jones in Emmanuel Choice. Spectacular senior season.
Yeah, now I do want to be clear, Eddie. You got me on Blanchard. I'll get you with Lancaster. They're actually still playing. They've got Longview this weekend.
I was thinking of Michael Fasusi. My apologies. I'm never going to be allowed in the indoor at Lancaster High School, which we've gone to before.
You also pulled a carry and called Emmett Jones Emmanuel Jones.
Well, there is a lot of Emmanuels, and I do like the book in the good book, but I'll change subjects. Emmanuel Choice, really good senior season.
Smooth, beautiful. He really did. And guys, we talked about it when I went and saw him in the season opener against North Crowley, where Lancaster was just kind of overmatched. And North Crowley's a legit state title contender. Lancaster kind of in a transitional year, not having the season that we're used to seeing from them. But a guy that, like, you could tell, even in the few opportunities he got, right here is what we're talking about. Look at him accelerate in short space. Like, for a guy. And I don't know if everybody can appreciate it when they see him, and because he's kind of tucked down, his knees are bent. Emmanuel Choice is every bit of 6'3 and a half, 6'4. He is a large wide receiver, and he's separating from North Crowley guys that, I want to remind everybody, went and beat DeSoto. Like, that's not nobody's. That North Crowley team is very, very good, and I thought Emmanuel Choice he was the one weapon that North Crowley couldn't deal with on the night I saw him. And he did it all year, guys. I mean, you just watch him over and over again, and he does it in a lot of different ways. I mean, like you said, you'll see him make plays after the catch here, which is not what you think of with a guy that size, a big outside receiver like that. But he can do it from all angles. I don't think there's any reason OU fans shouldn't be very excited, and I think he was worthy of this move. I thought he was a little undervalued. I'm kind of frankly surprised to see him make that big of a jump, but I thought top 150 was absolutely in the cards for him.
Was there anybody, Josh, just quickly, that you thought should have jumped more than they did?
The guy I continue to love that On3 is just a little down on is AMmarans Robinson. He's a guy that every time I watch the kid, whether it's, on tape, when I had a chance to see him against Melissa, all that dude does is make plays. He's just around the football all the time. Now, he is 5'9", and he's probably 180 pounds. Like, he is kind of Delarian Turner yellish, like that kind of body type. But like Delarian, is always around the football, very aggressive, willing to come up and hit you, can make plays when the ball's in the air. There's just not a lot not to like. It kind of I guess it's hindsight being 2020, but there is some Eli Bowen there where you're just like, man, all he does is just play against really good competition and dominate. Like, I don't have a problem with that. Now, I think we talked about this last week. AMmarans had an injury. I think he's done for his senior year. Parkview is still chasing another state title. So we'll have to watch him. And I would say is kind of and before George can get this question to me, because we know he wants to ask it, AMmarans Robinson and Emmanuel Choice, those are the two that I kind of hear keep an eye out, because Arkansas obviously hasn't fallen flat on its face like a lot of people expected it to. Certainly not doing any worse than Oklahoma's doing this year. And I know they continue to work on AMmarans Robinson. They've got a couple of his teammates committed. And then you look at Emmanuel Choice, this only turns up, when schools are kind of looking at him and saying, hey, maybe we could make a run there. This is only going to further their interest, because it looks good for a position coach to say, hey, we flipped this guy from Oklahoma. He's a top 100 player. That looks good when it comes time to, renegotiate contracts. So there's a lot there that's kind of interesting with these two guys. Those are two names I've kind of heard come up a little bit. From what I understand, they continue to tell Oklahoma the right things. We'll watch it though, because again, we're coming down the stretch. We all know, about 2.5 weeks until signing day. So it's not that far away, and then we kind of get to figure out where things really stand.
Man, it's going to be an interesting couple weeks here, because I just think that a lot of dominoes are going to start falling, whether it's recruiting and signing day, the portal coming up, but who leaves, who stays, and this offensive coordinator hire, and if he brings however many staff members he brings with him, it's going to be very interesting. And even, Josh, you mentioned Arkansas. Is that a head coach opening somewhere? And does that take, I was thinking about this today. This is maybe for a different podcast or a different show, but, what if Arkansas hires John Summerall from Tulane and he brings Joe Craddock with him, or Joe Craddock goes to Florida State? Like, just the amount of different dominoes that could happen, and all of a sudden, how does that affect Oklahoma? It's all gonna. I think that every week we're like, okay, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? Everybody wants something to happen.
If you put your hand in the ring, it's a small pool. It's a small pool of guys, and it's going to be a domino effect. You're right.
Yeah, and we just don't know what jobs are going to be open. I mean, I was going through my head. I'm like, other than maybe Arkansas, what head coaching jobs in the SEC are going to be open?
Yeah.
I mean, there could be, and if Arkansas goes and makes a bowl game, maybe that job doesn't come open.
Sure.
And all of a sudden there's no changes in the SEC this offseason. So, I mean, there's a lot that could play out over the next couple of weeks. And like I said, everybody keeps wanting something to happen with the OC search, head coaching searches, recruiting. Wait, it's coming. It's gonna come at some point. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, it's all these things have to happen. They're going to happen. And just as each day goes by, it just gets more condensed, and eventually the dam just breaks. And it's going to be guys, I know we hadn't planned to talk about this, but it really applies. So yesterday, on Sunday, we watched Juju Lewis decommit from USC. Immediately, Husan Longstreet flips from Texas A&M to USC. And there's been questions all along that if Husan Longstreet made that change, and that's kind of been in the cards, kind of rumored for a couple of months now, where would Texas A&M look? And Kevin Sperry is a name that has come up. Like, that's been a conversation that people have had. Now, I talked to some Texas A&M sources yesterday. I don't think there's a clear cut, like, okay, if this is who they're going to pivot to. I think they may, take a few days, kind of make some decisions, but I'm not going to tell you that OU may not have a fight on their hands there in the Kevin Sperry situation. So, and with no OC to fight that battle, that gets really complicated. So there's a lot here that can still play out. And like George said, in recruiting, it's the same in coaching. Once one thing falls, it all starts happening pretty fast.
That kind of leads us into the next conversation. Obviously going to be getting out to see a number of OK Preps guys that are in action here over the next couple weeks, still alive in the playoffs and that kind of stuff. Josh, I mean, if there was somebody that Oklahoma was going to get involved with here late in the process, is there anybody that sticks out to you? I know that the 2025 quarterback situation, as you kind of just laid out, if there were something to happen with Kevin Sperry, I guess, who would they turn to? Who would be somebody that you would maybe keep an eye on? I know we've talked about it for, it seems like years now, this 2025 group, rather special. Is there somebody from that group that maybe Oklahoma would put their sights on?
If ever there was a year for Oklahoma to lose a quarterback late, this is the year to do it. Like, I mean, there are 3 guys in state. You've got Grady Adamson at Deer Creek, who's committed to Georgia Tech. You've got David McComb at Edmond Memorial, who's committed to Kansas. And then you've got Jamarian Ficklin at Muskogee that's committed to Texas State. Now, what's interesting is I had long thought it would be Adamson. Like, I know some people on that staff that really like Grady Adamson. He's come to camp kind of in his younger years, in the Levy years. He came a couple of times, really impressed some people. And I know I'd even had some conversations with people that said it's pretty neck and neck. Like, it's kind of what you like between Adamson and Sperry. They really, there are people around that program that really like Grady Adamson. Now, the guy that's really come on as of late is David McComb. David McComb's having a great senior year for Edmond Memorial. Obviously, who did they beat recently? Here was it? They had a big win. It wasn't Bixby. I'm thinking of Norman.
Norman beat
Bixby. Union. They beat Union.
Yeah, that's who it was. Yeah, Memorial beat Union late, and I saw Memorial in the spring. That's that's a good team, but to say they went to Union and won, that's pretty impressive. And I think he's had a really good senior year. I know he's impressed some people. I talked to David last week. To date, he's had no contact with Oklahoma, and he reiterated that he's a solid commitment to Kansas, really likes what they're doing up there. KU's done a good job recruiting Oklahoma. The one that Oklahoma has had contact with and was at that main game and plans to return for Alabama is Jamarian Ficklin, the guy at Muskogee that won the Ruffers their first state title in, almost 40 years last year, got them back on track again to do it again in 6A2. There's a lot of interest. And what was interesting to me is he is the guy that the first guy I've heard talk about Kevin Johns. And he was like, I really like him. You could tell how much he is, a details guy. And he talked about just really kind of almost instantly growing fond of Kevin Johns, their first real time to interact when he was up there for that main game. So that's the guy I would be watching right now. But the other two are extremely talented, both Power 5 commitment or Power 4 commitments. And so you want to watch those. Like, I'm not saying I know which way this is going to play, but just based on the movements we're seeing, Jamarian Ficklin's kind of seems like the guy that maybe OU targets if things don't work out with Sperry.
Would be very interesting.
It's going to be, hearing the Kevin Johns thing, it's my understanding that Oklahoma would like to keep him in some fashion on its staff. I think that him and Brent have really connected. Maybe he would move back into an analyst role. And when you talk about, this offensive coordinator search, some of these names that have come up are relatively young offensive coordinators, right? For example, if they were to hire a Ben Arbuckle, who's 29 years old, has been calling plays for 3 years now, but is really young,
right?
You'd probably like to have a Kevin Johns who's been in the business a long time. He can kind of work alongside him. And then you look at this quarterback situation, and it's really interesting, Josh, because let's say OU loses Jackson Arnold in the portal. They lose, or one of Jackson Arnold, one of Michael Hawkins in the portal, maybe even both. And then you lose maybe a Brendan Zerberg. You're losing Casey Thompson. You're going to have to restock that quarterback room in some way. And it wouldn't be surprising. I wonder if Oklahoma would say, okay, maybe you try to get Ficklin and you bring in Ficklin and Sperry. Would Sperry like that? I don't know. Maybe you lose Sperry, but you bring in Ficklin, an in-state kid, and then whoever you hire as the OC, maybe they bring a portal guy and then they go out and get a late commitment in the class. I don't know, but I could see them maybe in a scenario trying to bring in – they're going to have to bring in multiple quarterbacks in some fashion. And if you can go get an in-state kid like Ficklin, who I get it, he doesn't have maybe some of the offers that these other guys do, but I think that they really like his raw talent. It makes a lot of sense. And so, I don't know. I just find it really interesting. Again, it goes back to that same conversation. A lot of dominoes have to fall here to see how this is all going to play out. But it's starting, if you start connecting the dots, a lot of this makes sense.
It feels like that first domino, though, is kind of teetering.
Oh, yeah.
It has to. It's getting closer and closer.
It's wavering right now.
No doubt about it. All right. It's going to be interesting. I think I might head up to Muskogee. There's 2 Putnam City schools that are represented still in the state playoffs in Oklahoma. It's Putnam City and Putnam City North. I don't see Putnam City West, though. Josh? Interesting.
Yeah. A few weeks ago was a rough one in this house. Ponca City took out Putnam City West. It was there were bragging rights in the McCuistion household, and I do not hold them. It was bad.
All right. Well, I guess the good news is you got back the bragging rights because Ponca City's season is over. They get beat by Piedmont on this past Friday, 48-7. Piedmont now taking on Sand Springs in, what would that be? Quarterfinal action in 6A2. So, all right, that's going to do it. OU Alabama week, as I was reminded, one of my good friends out there, he does have a tattoo on his ass. And that means that OU can beat Alabama when they're a 2-touchdown underdog. You might not get the tattoo this time on Bourbon Street, but it does count for something. And all of that will be coming up on Saturday evening, 6:30 kickoff in Norman. Practice tonight with some of the players. We'll be back for the practice report coming on Tuesday after we hear from Brent Venables on Tuesday over at the stadium to really kind of, I guess, start OU Alabama week. For Josh and George, I'm Eddie. We'll see you right back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel.